Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in TradFi, digital assets, technology, and financial planning. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk this afternoon, we have Dan Joldzic, CEO of Alexandria Technology, Jason Albert, Global Chief Privacy Officer at ADP, Glenn Kurban, partner at Capco, and Mike Pappacena, partner at ACA Group. They join me to discuss what data governance is, why it matters, and what companies need to consider regarding policy, internal standards, and best practices. Gentlemen, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to TradeTalks, and clearly a key topic for any organization these days. I mean, data is certainly everything. So let's go around the horn here. Dan, I'm going to start with you. Data governance, why is it so crucial? What are some of the challenges with data governance?
Yeah, and this is a pretty big topic in our space. So Alexandria, we deliver uncorrelated information to end users. And how we do that is by taking a look at large panels of data to identify, well, classify and identify pieces of information that might have been missed by end users. And for us, data governance is crucial because you need to understand where the data is coming from and what is within it, right? So we're always looking at sources, whether they be, well, we typically work with public sources of information and to ensure there's no material non-public information. So that's a pretty big understanding for us with data governance, no personal information, and really trying to verify the credibility of information overall that we end up delivering to end users, and that ends up being crucial for our client base.
Yeah, and Jason, if you get a paycheck, you probably know who ADP is.
Exactly. No, we're very excited. You know, we have over 1 million clients across 140 countries, 41 million wage earners, and that generates a lot of data that allows us to provide powerful, actionable insights to our clients. But the only way you can do that is if you have a strong data governance program. You have to be focused on the quality of the data to make sure that the insights that you're generating are both actionable and accurate. You have to understand where that data resides. You have to understand who has controls over it. When you work with AI, you have to understand how that data is being shared with a generative AI engine to take steps to protect it. And so we're very focused on data governance because we want to make sure that we are ethical, secure, and compliant in how we use our clients' information in order to generate those insights for them.
Mm-hmm. And Glenn?
Yes, thank you, Jill, for having us today. So I'm with Capco, where I help to run our data and analytics practice. Capco is a 25-year-old management consulting firm. We're global, also based here in New York from a US perspective. We focus on financial services as an industry vertical, and we help top banks and insurers and fintech organizations all over the country and globally actually establish data governance competencies or mature those functions within their organizations. What we have found, at least in the market today, data governance as a term and a practice is not new. We've been doing this for the past 15 to 20 years. It was probably called something before that. But in the regulatory world and the demands around regs and compliance that we live in today, data governance is paramount, particularly for financial services institutions. So we see a lot of value in the work we do. We help clients with people, process, technology related to data governance, and these are conversations that we're having every day.
Yeah. And Mike?
Great. Hi. Thanks, Joe. Mike Pappacena. I'm with ACA Group. We're a governance, risk, and compliance firm, and we do consulting for financial services. We do a lot of work with private markets, private equity, hedge fund, investment companies, et cetera. I oversee the cybersecurity and risk division. And why data governance is important is when you think of things from a cyber and risk perspective, you need to understand where your data is in your organization in order to manage it properly. It's very important that firms take, I would say, a managed approach to categorizing their data, discovering their data, making sure, as was said before, you're meeting necessary regulatory obligations, but then applying the controls around where that data is so you can keep it secure. I don't know, we can dig into this later, but when you think about recent cyber attacks and you think about ransomware and how that gets into organizations, usually it navigates its way and traverses and takes data, due to really, potentially lack of protection. So making sure you understand where your data is and putting appropriate controls around it can help you keep your firm more secure.
Right. So what does data governance look like? What does that structure look like? Of course, companies don't want to be too siloed, and you want to be able to have that, bird's eye view of what's happening across all of the business organizations within the enterprise. So what does data organization look like? Is there someone that sits at the top and then, how do you make data governance happen?
Yeah, I'll say within financial services, we talk about the 3 lines of defense, right? So your first line is really your business stakeholders and the folks that are interacting with customers. Your second line typically is your risk function, and that's often where your data governance function sits. And then the third line is, internal audit with all of the control environments and everything that they help to maintain within the organization. By having data governance in the middle as that sort of go-between and connection point between the business and between the back-end audit function that maintains and mandates controls, you have connectivity between what the business needs from a data perspective and actually how you control your data environment, from a regulatory and compliance standpoint. So most of what we've seen with data governance, 15, 20 years ago, it started off as a sort of a centralized concept. More and more, we're seeing it become a federated concept in banking and financial services, meaning we have a central group that sort of sets policy and direction, but we leave to the organizational business units the ability to actually shape governance around, how they need data served up, how data should be created, maintained, retired.
Yeah, we take a similar approach, but with a couple of, I think, key differences. So we have a chief data officer who's really focused, among other things, on data governance and really is looking at the data from our systems, making sure that that's high quality, making sure that we have accurate data discovery tools so we can find both structured and unstructured data throughout our system, and to be able to provide sort of a common language or a common way to be able to serve those insights back up into the systems that our clients use. And so, when you have a bunch of disparate systems based on the size of the clients and being able to bring that data together to drive those insights, and then, in the age of AI and machine learning, to be able to provide those controls to make sure that we test for things like validity and accuracy of the AI outputs, to be able to have control over that, to be able to serve a consistent experience is really important. So for us, it all starts with our chief data officer and his function, and then of course we have controls on that through global compliance, which I'm part of, audit, and other parts of the business as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what it boils down to is understanding your data, right? More than anything else, right? Because as the amount of data availability grows, you sort of lose the detail within it, right? So we'll often work with various partners, right? Some that are large publishers of information, and other times we'll look at smaller publishers that might be less known, and the first thing we do is a very deep dive of the data, right? Where is this coming from? How clean is it? Do we understand it? Does this all make sense? We've also had people approach us that hey, we have a history of 50,000 blogs, and my response to them was, well, that doesn't actually, more is not better. It's just more. It's just more for us to have to look at, because what are those blogs? I can go through and check 100 blogs much easier than I can 50,000 blogs. And is there someone really going through all 50,000 sites to confirm how valid or good they are? So you really need a strong understanding of what's within your data panels. And then another question we get all the time now is, can you confirm that there's no malware, no nefarious code in your data? And of course our answer is yes, we can. So it's an easy question in a DDQ, but you really have to understand what you're ingesting, what you're producing, and then what you're sending out.
Yeah.
And I think kind of, to talk through the governance too, it's really understanding what's important to the company and the firm. I think every firm needs to, take a look at their data, understand where you might have, non-public identifiable information, whether it's of customers, employees, et cetera, and make sure that's adequately protected. Understand what's important to your business, what makes it run. If you're a trading firm, algorithms, et cetera, how well you're protecting that. Have the appropriate classifications and understand where that data lives, if you will, or exists within your environment. And one other thing to think about too is environment is not just what you have maybe on on-premise architecture. More and more firms are moving to cloud-based servers and cloud-based systems. They're trusting third parties, whether it's ADP, right, or your firm, with their data and information, to make sure that you have an understanding of where that is, you have that inventoried, and that you can do the appropriate review and make sure the controls are in place.
Right, especially as a cyber professional, you think about this all the time. In AI, it could be a double-edged sword. Nefarious actors are leveraging it, as well as everyone here leveraging AI to perfect their businesses as well, so that you get that outcome. How has AI, Gen AI innovation, because you want to get speed, you want to get it to market, but you also want to think about the risk control that's involved with that as well. How is that impacting data governance?
So I think when you think about using AI tools, I think if you get down to basics, you really should just think of it as another system that I'm going to use, that I'm going to trust my data to or with. And if you take that approach, I think you apply the same principles that you would apply with any tool that's providing you back information. And just making sure that you are understanding what data you're going to feed to that tool. Make sure that if the tool that you're using, depending on what kind of engine's in the background, that you've done your due diligence, right? That data is going to be protected. And then the other thing too is making sure you understand the output of that data. You want to make sure that the data that's coming back when you ask it the questions is valid and that you have a validation process before you put it to work.
Yeah, but I'd add on top of that, right, yes, the traditional things, right, from a privacy perspective, data minimization, what goes there, data masking, so that the tool doesn't need to know specific identifiers. But beyond that, there's a range of AI ethical concerns that you have to layer in on top. So for example, in 2019 at ADP, we created a data and ethics council to consider novel uses of data, novel AI things, and now with generative AI, we've established an end-to-end governance process that involves the CDO, involves my privacy function, involves legal, it involves our global security organization to go and assess use cases to make sure that we are continuing to protect data from a privacy perspective, from a security perspective, that we address things like validity, that we make sure the recommendations have bias mitigated, and we deal with sort of the novel ethical questions around that. So it's another layer even on top, I think, of the existing controls that you'd have with any vendor.
Yeah. So, one of the things we talk about quite often when we talk about data governance is really this subcomponent or focus on data quality. And so when we talk about AI and our clients ask us, hey, how do we take the leap into data products that, focus on or leverage AI? The answer is unequivocally, you need to double down on the basics of data governance, because we know the old garbage in, garbage out principle around if your data is not ready for prime time, AI is just another channel to serve up bad data. So really, when we talk to CDOs and heads of data, the idea is everything, all the good work that you're doing around data quality and those programs, you need to take that up a notch, because AI will amplify what you have that does not look good, right, in your data stores.
Yeah, because there's just an inherent lack of transparency that you're just going to have to accept with generative AI, right? Like if you're going to use OpenAI or ChatGPT, it's trained on 1 trillion parameters. You don't know what those are. You don't know what the inputs are to train that language model. It's probably something like Common Crawl, which is a massive corpus of web-based data. And you just have to sort of trust that those are all valid inputs into the model. So I think to your point, like more than ever, because you've lost the engineering component of what's inside the box, you really need to understand the data that's going in and the data that's coming out, because you've lost that transparency in the middle.
Yeah, well, what about data coming out? I mean, if you kind of control what's going in, if you think about it from an ethical and responsible use perspective, but we see this in academia all the time. Yes, you can get a data set out, but it's still the person at the end who has to interpret it and use it within their work. So are there any governance controls around data out?
I think there are. So first of all, when you're thinking about something like generative AI, you have techniques such as Rouge scores to compare them to what humans would do to make sure that the tool consistently provides a valuable output that's valid, that's accurate. Beyond that, right, AI is not some sort of magic tool. The human oversight is what's really important. And so that's at the heart of what we do. We design tools that are to help people, whether it's providing more natural language answers that people can then assess and act upon, whether it's providing predictions that help people make better decisions. It's all about enabling humans to be more creative, enabling humans to act faster, but always with that oversight element to combine that human judgment with a tested for validity and accuracy output that creates a recommendation.
Yeah, and I agree with everything Jason said, and I would overlay that as well with the idea that data governance organizations are often associated with and help to facilitate data literacy within the enterprise, meaning that every one of us in our organization, and pretty much every organization, is dealing with data in some way, shape, or form. I mean, all the way from call centers, dealing with customers, first line, reading things off screen that are really your enterprise data, all the way to the back office. The idea that people need to understand, is the data that I'm looking at reliable? Can I actually portray this as reliable to our customers, to the street, et cetera? That's an education. And this whole concept of data literacy, we're seeing more and more of that being born out of data governance programs.
Right, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a hunt trail manager and you're getting that data out, you're going to make the investment decision at the end of the day anyway.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say, and if you're making those decisions, you better make sure that the output that you're getting from any tools you're using are valid, because ultimately, you're acting on that and making sure that that output is helping you, guiding you to the right decision.
So, yeah, and that's why transparency is key, right? Like, I mean, we produce a lot of, like, we ingest terabytes of data, we produce terabytes of data. At the very end, we always have a transparency feature where if you want to get to any individualized classification, it's there for you. Right? Like that way you can have trust and you can sample and do what you like, just to make sure that what you're seeing is valid and correct.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it now, you're ingesting and outputting terabytes of data. It looks like it feels like a lot now. Imagine this 10 to 20 years from now. I mean, data begets data, right? So in the last few minutes here, again, let's go around the horn, but I mean, what does this look like in 5, 10 years from now?
Well, I mean, I think there's no question the data is going to expand, right? Like, I mean, when I look at all the data availability, so my background, I was a quantitative analyst at Bernstein. And it always amazed me. We had all of these information sources that we didn't use. We just warehoused it, and that was just your traditional text-based sources. Pretty soon, people are going to be looking at podcasts, looking at video series like this. No one is really looking at like Bloomberg TV, CNBC, any cable news show to really kind of turn that into text and then actually analyze that text. So, and there's going to be new media that we don't even know about yet, and it's just going to increase overall. So like that's why the data governance component becomes even more important, and really understanding where the data is coming from, the quality of the data is paramount.
I think, to Dan's point, data governance functions today, they're fairly limited in terms of dealing with anything that is unstructured in nature around data. I think the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see tools available to us that puts these things on rails and really helps with data quality around unstructured data sources, NLP on steroids, data vision, all of these capabilities that we're now starting to hear about in the market. I think these will be the big players, in the next few years.
Yeah, I agree. Unstructured data is important, and we're already beginning a work to assess that, discover that, understand that. But even beyond that, like, it's not only going to be the explosion of data, but the continued evolution of these capabilities. I mean, 3 years ago, who had thought about generative AI? Now, it's everywhere. We're all investing in it. We're all using it. And so when you have the combination of increased data and you have these enhanced capabilities, you're going to have even better insights, again, for those powerful, actionable recommendations that are going to help, unleash human creativity, allow us to move up the value chain and do even better in our jobs on a day-to-day basis.
And just simple compute is going to help with that too, right? As GPUs become more and more powerful, like, I can envision a world where every single source of information is graded. And like the great thing about finance is you have a continuous feedback loop of asset returns. So you can say this person is a high quality source because they correlate nicely to forward returns in some respect, right? And then hopefully as compute just gets better and better, you're able to do this across the millions of data sources available and then keep the ones that are good and ignore or monitor the ones that aren't.
Spoken like a true quant. but I think, Jason, you made a great point. This really came to the forefront. Was it November 2022?
Yeah.
We started to learn about ChatGPT. I mean, AI is nothing new for you guys. I mean, you've been leveraging it for years. I feel because ChatGPT became part of the consumer-facing vernacular. That's why it was the story for 2023. And I feel like now, okay, where are the product lines? How is it being used? It's a show me story in 2024, and that's only going to amp up what's happening in the data space as well. So, Mike, from your perspective, I think it's interesting because like you're in the cyberspace. How do you see this evolving?
So I think evolving, same way you talk about data, more volume of data. I think from a cyber perspective, we see a lot of opportunity to leverage AI tools within cyberspace, so to speak. You'll see more and more tools being implemented to help you with data discovery, right? Looking at tracking vulnerabilities, looking at the tool sets being able to help evaluate threats, et cetera, sort of becoming that first line of defense, say in a SOC. So I expect that AI to develop in that too as well.
All right, gentlemen, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me from MarketSite. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.